Welcome to the Arena Decklist podcast. I'm Jerry Thompson, joined almost always by Brian Gottlieb.
Wow, never going to live this 1 week off the show down. It's just going to be here forever.
Technically correct is the best kind of correct, Brian.
Okay, I guess so.
Dude, you want to know what's not correct?
What is not correct?
Stealing a bunch of money out of prize pools.
Yeah, that is that's bad. Very bad.
World Championship was 27. I don't even know. Are we the Super Bowl? Clearly not. But they released a little snippet about this, and previously it was supposed to be a $1 million total prize pool. It is now $250,000. They did not say that, this prize pool has changed or where this money is going. They just kind of tried to slip it under there,
Yep. So multiple people have reached out to me and told me that they appreciate that our show is generally very clean and they can listen to it with their children in the car and feel good about it.
I said an F-bomb last week. I felt bad. It just kind of slipped out.
We do try, though. I mean, mostly because I've gotten that feedback and I like that and it's important to me and I appreciate people sharing that with me, which is why I'm going to share with you. Take a minute or so off the cast right now, just turn your speakers down and cover your kids' ears, whatever you have to do. 3, 2, 1, because I am fucking pissed. This is bullshit, Jerry. This isn't, we can sit here and we can debate Wizards' decisions a lot. And sometimes we do it too much and we can be overcritical and the community can be overly critical. I'll be the first to admit that. This isn't that. This is stealing. This is lying about prize support and taking the money from people. And I just don't know how you can have any faith in a company that continues to do garbage like this. And it is just absolute unforgivable garbage. The first time they did it, it was garbage. And now to do it a second time after being very clearly caught the first time, it's super garbage. And I'm so disappointed in Wizards of the Coast. This is the type of thing where I can actually galvanize my anger around it. I can't get angry about, oh, you reprinted this card or a card has to be banned in standard. Those are mistakes. Those are forgivable mistakes. And also people want different things out of Magic. So I'm always willing to let that stuff slide. I'm not letting this slide though. This is unforgivable stealing at a moment when Magic is making more money than it ever has before. We get that thrown in our face constantly. Every decision we don't like, everything we're upset about the course of the game, well, Magic's making more money than ever. Magic's doing better than ever. Magic's healthier than ever. So maybe you're just wrong. And I go, okay, maybe I'm just wrong. But you're definitely fucking wrong if you're just stealing when you're making more money than ever. And I'm so upset about this. And it's how do you show up at Worlds? And look, some people reached out to me. I don't want to name any names during this part of the conversation. Some people reached out and were like, financially, I have to go to Worlds. I get that. I respect that. I don't fault anyone for falling on that side of the coin. And especially because a lot of these people just lost their long-term jobs with the death of professional Magic. So more power to you. Go get your money. That's fine. Other people reached out and were like, well, it's still a high level competition and it's always been about winning for me and I'm still going to go. Are you a clown? Seriously, how long are you going to buy into this garbage narrative that there's any meaning behind this to let yourself be exploited by Wizards? It's such a joke to feel that way because this is how we got to this point. You let yourself be exploited. You let yourself be used to advertise this game over and over and over and never push back. And to just say, oh, it's fine because it's supposed to be a competition. Come on, maybe you'll enjoy it, but it won't be here for the next person. And if that's cool with you, fine. That's your priority. But I don't know how you possibly justify it under those terms.
Well, it's not going to be there for that person either. This person who is holding on to, oh, I just want to play in these high level competitive events. It's well, now those are gone.
Yeah.
So, maybe.
When are you going to stand up and fight for them? When?
Right. Yeah. Maybe y'all should have done some shit when I was doing some shit a few years ago.
Yeah. That's the one thing I keep coming back to. There was a moment where a bunch of people could have galvanized around this idea of we deserve better and maybe it makes a difference. But that moment clearly passed and didn't gain a whole bunch of bandwagon support. I think you had community support, but in terms of other people making the same moves, it didn't really happen. But again, financially, I can understand that because a lot of the reason Wizards gets away with this stuff is because they have created financial dependency not only on players' parts, but like our part too. We are dependent for our living on producing Magic income. So do you think I want to promote Wizards game
Well,
right now? Absolutely not. I don't want to say a word about Magic, but what do I do in that spot?
right. No, I mean, obviously, I share the same sentiment there. But as far as the like Wizards has made the player financially dependent on them, it's like that's not really true because I mean, you're if you're like a Magic professional, anytime in like the last 5 or 10 years, if you did not use that to strike out on your own and get some sort of like backup plan, like creating content or sponsorships or whatever. It's like that is on you. If you're just like, well, I'm going to collect my platinum money and then put in the bare minimum just to keep that going, and then you're like surprised when that dries up, given that the writing
Yeah,
has been
yeah.
on the wall. It's like that is kind of on that person, right? Like I certainly Wizards can you can blame them as much as you want. I'm fine with that for like their organized play decisions and jerking around their player base, especially like the actual pro community or whatever. But if people find themselves in a situation where it's like, oh, the money tree dried up and I never did anything about it, and like, granted, we're kind of in that situation, right? It's like it's kind of on them where if suddenly like Star City doesn't want to do content anymore and no one wants to listen to our podcast anymore, like that's on us. Like we just like hung on to a sinking ship, and it's a bad idea, right?
Yeah, I should clarify a little bit my stance. It's less like reliance on the Wizards dollars and more reliance on the broader ecosystem. So like I agree with you. You need to seek other means of producing an income, and like you and I did that. I mean, especially it rings more true for you because you had capability to go ahead and just make a bunch of money playing the game, whereas I didn't. But we found other ways to monetize, be it content creation or this podcast. And but there's still this backbone where all of those things are constantly hyping up Magic and constantly
Yeah,
hyping up the next set. I mean, that's look at what we spent the last 4 weeks doing here, just telling you I should go buy Modern Horizons 2.
right.
And you don't think that puts money in Wizards' pockets? It
No, of course
absolutely
it does.
does.
Of course it does. I mean, like ideally, what people should be doing around Modern Horizons is like renting and getting a rental account from Card Hoarder, playing on Magic Online, and like taking money out of the ecosystem potentially. And
Hopefully.
you
Well,
know,
I think that's the best case scenario for that type of participation. There's I keep thinking more about my relationship with Magic and like why I'm still here, what I get out of it. And I think it's the same for both you and I is that we love solving this puzzle, right?
correct.
We love coming back and looking at these new cards and building new decks. And that's never going to change for either of us. But I'll tell you this: if there's no competitive play, I can't trust you to honor prize commitments. I don't need your cards to play with your puzzle. There's Apprentice, Magic Workstation. I can print proxies. I can write on the back of cards, and that idea is still there for me. So why should I continue to invest in your product when this is all readily available? And it's so funny because for years, people not invested in the game would always go to me, well, why do you need the official cards? Why don't you just make your own and play the game that way? And that's like the first thing that many people outside the space think of. And you go, no, well, to participate in tournaments, you have to have the actual cards. They will check. It's important that you have genuine Magic cards. But if there's no tournaments, I don't give a shit. Like, I'll just make my own Magic cards and play games with it. I don't care anymore. Like, I would say this totally differently a year ago, but this is stealing again. And when a company is not only like trying to make money from me, I can understand that. You're allowed to try and make money from me. More power to you. You're not allowed to lie and steal from me. That's where I draw the line. And I look for ways to step outside your ecosystem.
So the most conflicted feeling that I have during all of this is when you raise the question of, okay, what do we do now? How do we make an impact? Like should people uh like protest this event by sitting out or whatever? And the conflicted part of me is like, it's not going to do anything, and it's like
Right.
actually genius on their part to remove all the power from the players. So like they're cutting the prize pool, they're clearly trying to walk back, you know, a huge investment on pro Magic. And it just means that if literally everyone sits out of the tournament, they're just like, okay, cool. This is what we
Yep.
wanted anyway.
You're right. You're right. Again, they have engineered themselves to a position where they hold all the power. And, I proposed some ideas to maybe get around that. Like everyone agrees to a split and all but 8 people drop from the tournament and all those 8 people register nonsense. Like that probably works. But again, everyone has to be on board. You have to trust everyone you're dealing with. And you have to not have Wizards just be like, no, we're shutting this down and not doing it anymore because you're not competing the way we want you to. Because they could do that too. I mean, in fairness, they have terms that say we can change the prize pool at our sole discretion anytime we want. It's almost always written on everything they offer. So maybe legally they can do this. I don't really care what you can do legally. Do you know what people get away with legally on a daily basis in America and around the world?
Hella.
Yeah, garbage, absolute garbage. So go ahead and do this legally. That doesn't make you an honorable corporation. It doesn't make it a just decision. It just makes it so you can't get sued for it. And I'm not even sure about that in this case because this is so egregious. It's not even funny.
Wizards does not care about you.
Yeah, I think that is patently clear. And I
Straight
will
up.
be the first to say I don't think that was always the case. I think they've loved their players for many, many years.
Well, I mean, it depends on like what part of the company that you're talking about because it is a big company, and I very much look at like the people who are creating the game and the world and all that stuff very different than the branded marketing and like organized play team.
Sure.
At least in this point,
Yeah,
So
that's
like
fair.
when I'm just like, yeah, Wizards doesn't care about you. It's the fourth floor people, not the third floor people. Like the third floor people are the ones who love Magic as much as you do.
Right. Right. And I can't imagine what it feels like for them right now because so many of them obviously come from like the same space as we do. So many of them are our friends and just watch the way the higher ups are treating the player base with complete disdain and milking them for every dollar they're worth and burning through reprint equity and producing $30 packs of Magic cards and just over and over and over every way you could think of to squeeze a dollar from your player base and not give it back. We've seen over the last 2 years to great success, by the way. They are killing it. Good for you. I kind of despise you as a company now. That's what it cost you. You don't. I would be the first on the corner yelling, "Wizards is great. Buy Magic cards. I love these things so much." I just don't feel that way anymore. I still love the game, but this is too much. This is a bridge too far.
And this is like the 20th thing that they've done. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back or whatever.
Right. Everyone's gonna have their straw. That's what I keep saying. Like,
yeah, there's a line for
gonna
everyone.
be the straw for everyone, and it feels like I got my straw with this announcement.
Yeah, I've been broken for a while, so it's like these things keep happening. Where during the pandemic, they're like, oh, we're cutting prize pools. Times are tough, and the quarterly earnings reports come out or whatever, and they're just like, look at how much money we're making. Ha ha ha.
Right.
So this is just like another thing where I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised. If people are surprised, I mean, you haven't been paying attention.
Oh, not the least bit surprised, just disappointed. That's all.
I continue to be disappointed. It just is what it is. I would probably be more flared up if I were actually in the middle of it.
Right.
If I were like qualified for the event or something, then maybe I would be trying to organize. Now it's just like I got to pass that torch. Like no one's really going to listen to me anyway. If I make suggestions for what to do. So
Sure.
someone else has to do it.
I would love anyone listening to this who wants to brainstorm ideas about what you can do in the moment to reach out to me. I'm happy to discuss it with you, but I mostly agree with you. People have made up their minds, and you're either trying to squeeze out the last dollar, which props, go ahead and get your money. I'm cool with that, or you just don't see it the same way I do, and then you and I are never going to have a meeting of the minds. So
stop buying secret layers.
It's a good start. I like that. But again, if like every competitive player stopped buying secret layers, would it even matter? And the answer is probably not. So
no, because I think that those are like there's some overlap there for sure, right? But clearly that is not the widest secret layer base that Wizards has access to. But if like I don't know, the sales of them dipped by 10%, maybe they notice, maybe they don't. I would guess not. They probably just like make an extra one or something to compensate. But
Yeah,
it
just
is
drop
it is
another.
no surprise that my feed on the day of the announcement was also a bunch of people gushing about the new secret layer announcements that they made.
Hmm.
It
Sure.
happened on the same day, and there were so many more people talking about the secret layer stuff than the world stuff.
I don't know if we've discussed this before. I was talking a little bit with Cedric about this week because Cedric's basically of the opinion. I'm going to paraphrase for him, so if I don't have his position exactly right,
No,
forgive
no, no,
me.
no, no. Feel free to misquote him and attempt to attribute
If
it to
that's
him.
allowed.
Friend of the
Um,
podcast, Cedric Phillips.
right. Cedric is basically of the opinion that like competitive Magic probably doesn't make Magic any money. And what does it matter if they cut these things? They're mostly correct in doing so. And it's funny because I both agree and disagree with him. I think the statement that competitive Magic is not making Magic a lot of money can be 100% true. And it can still have an outsized percentage of the brand's value tied up in it. And I don't know if that's clear just by saying that. So I'll try and dive a little deeper. Even if the competitive ecosystem isn't putting dollars directly into the pockets of Wizards, what is the capacity for it to instill value in the underlying resource of Magic cards? What's that worth to the brand? What about the fact that this is where a lot of the secondary market churn, and I know we have to pretend like the secondary market doesn't exist if we're Wizards, but like that's a joke. So what is the secondary market churn created by the competitive space worth to the brand? What happens to the brand if it leaves Target, if it leaves Walmart, which is, by the way, happening around me right now? I've heard mixed
Same.
reports. Okay, so I said that on Twitter, and a bunch of people are like, nah, the cards are still here. I haven't seen a Magic card in a Target or Walmart in a couple months now, and that's going from all the way in the West Coast to all the way on the East Coast. They're not there. And yes, they left because the demand was so high that they basically didn't feel comfortable offering those cards anymore. But that doesn't matter because if they're not selling them long term, it really doesn't matter the reason why they're not doing it.
Right.
It's just gone. And if they decide not to take it back, look, Magic's a drop in the hat for Walmart and Target. Ultimately, it doesn't matter all that much. And if they just say, yeah, this isn't worth the hassle, people are stealing from us, it's causing a run up, we're just not coming back into this.
But it's the type of thing where it kind of like mainstreams and legitimizes it when it shows up in a big box store like that. And
It absolutely does.
people are walking through the aisles, they see the products constantly, like they're constantly churning out new stuff. I remember like back in the day where it was like, they only had like 7th edition and it was like 7th edition, that was it. Right. But
Yep.
now it's like you go in, it's
Every
like,
product.
yeah, every single product, a bunch of different fantasy worlds. Like you look at it and you're like, oh, this is like a legit, like big brand. And then that legitimizes it in your eyes.
It does. And that's been huge in terms of creating Magic's growth. But what if they give up on that? What if you have to go back to the LGSs and you look around and there's no LGS left because they anchored themselves in, the FNM ecosystem? And, a lot of people say they anchor themselves in Commander now. Some places that's true, some it's less true. We'll have to see how things shake out. But my ultimate point is that, yes, tournament players can account for a small percentage of sales and still be absolutely critical to the long-term health, longevity, and just resiliency of the Magic brand. And don't be surprised if 5 years from now, 10 years from now, positions have changed dramatically and you don't have access to the big box stores and you have to ask yourself, how do we keep selling this product?
So I push back on Cedric's notion. I also had like a similar conversation with him where maybe right now I think that they are making the what appears to be correct decision from them, just from like a bottom line standpoint, right? Like a
Correct.
quarterly earnings standpoint.
Agree.
This is like a marketing cost. We can't figure out exactly what the returns are on this. Does it actually matter?
Yeah.
And I can understand completely how if you're an exec, you look at the numbers, you're just like this program doesn't make sense, right? Let's just axe it. But how did Magic get here?
Yep.
26 years or however long it's been, 27 years. And I think that it was probably similar throughout history where organized play was probably something that like bottom line cost them money, but it also makes it so that there is a like vast history to draw on from Magic, and it has longevity, and it just grants you legitimacy because you have like 25 years of the Pro Tour or whatever, right? Like, yeah, if they kept, churning out cards and you couldn't like go on the internet and like find old decks or whatever, right? Like that would be like pretty strange to me. And I'm not sure how it would affect things if it's just like, oh yeah, there's like a bunch of different cards, but it's not like you can go back, look at the history, see, what cards people were playing with other cards and being like, oh, that's cool. I want to do that. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that to some extent, competitive Magic helped prop up Magic for when it gets to this point, people can just like look at this vast wealth of information on the internet about this game. And again, it's like seeing all the different products in Target or something, right? You're just like, wow, like this game has been around for a long time. It has a lot of history. It's very deep.
It matters.
So it like go back in time, say there's never any organized play for Magic. I don't know how differently things shake out, but I think that if you want to make the argument that now is the time to shift mostly to commander type of stuff, then it probably makes sense to do that. But like competitive Magic, I think, played a large part in getting you to this point.
I agree with you entirely. It sounds like we look at this the same way. And again, like I think that's the thing that gets lost when I'm on Twitter and talking with Cedric, and it's just like it seems like we disagree. I don't actually disagree with his position at all. I just think it like is a small part of the picture.
It's
think
narrow. It's narrow, right? Because he's just like, well, bottom line, probably $0. And it's like, yeah, you're not wrong, but also there's a lot of stuff that you're not taking into consideration.
Yeah, that's my stance on it. Some of my opinion, I will admit, is colored by the way I engage with the game for sure, and I probably overstate it to some extent. But I do think that phenomenon is real. I think it's there, and I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen going forward. I am hopeful for many years more of Magic cards and ideas for me to continue to brew around. I'm less hopeful that I want to give this company gobs of money going forward.
So someone sits down to build a commander deck, right? And of all these classic sort of like combinations and interactions and things like that. And people have strong responses to that. Either it's like, oh, that's like, too powerful. I'm not trying to do like this busted like 2-card combo stuff or whatever. But then there are like the fun things that people gravitate a lot towards in Commander. And I think that a lot of that stuff wouldn't have the relevance or significance it has without it being like in extended deck in 2008 or whatever, right? And think about like all the people that are like unbanned Splinter Twin. It's not like, oh, I fundamentally believe that this would be fine in modern. It's this interaction that is like beloved by people for some reason. And I think that if you just scrub competitive Magic from the internet, like people don't care about that. They care about like modern less or what's going on in modern less. So that's like one example I think I can point to where it's like this has impact, this matters. And it makes people care about like the game and the format more because they can look back 10 years ago and look at this thing.
Yeah. Also, there was like a pretty misguided statement where someone tried to credit the Pro Tour players with like creation of Commander. I think that's going too far. And I don't think the Pro Tour was essential for the creation of Commander.
It's happenstance, right? It's like where, those judges happen to be like engaging in Magic.
Yes.
And either Commander was going to happen or something else was going to happen. Like before Commander, there's 5-color 250, which was like very much a Wisconsin thing. And it's like, yeah, those players were all like PTQ players, but it's like they would have figured out something on their own without it.
I agree entirely, but I don't think those things can happen or spread without a competitive scene. It doesn't have to be the Pro Tour, but like there has to be competitive Magic, people gathering from all over the country, coming together, sharing those ideas. I don't think any of these things can exist without that.
I believe Commander was invented by someone who lived in Alaska.
Okay. Interesting.
So that kind of goes to your point, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like if
How
that
do you get how does it get down from Alaska to the mainland? Like,
yes, exactly. It's like you can talk about it on the internet and maybe it picks up steam from there or whatever, but it's like really you need that Alaskan person to go around and travel and like introduce it to other people. So
I think so. I mean, from
Pro
a
Tour is a good
tactile
vehicle.
sense,
Pro Tour is a good vehicle for stuff like that, but it wasn't. If it wasn't the Pro Tour, it could have been something else.
yeah, I just think there has to be something where Magic players are getting together, and I don't know. Maybe like now that that exists, the Command Fest will continue to play that role in the future. Time will tell. I'm open to that possibility.
Uh oh,
Well,
Wizards.
well, now we get to the part of the show where we talk about new Magic cards. I guess.
Yeah, great. Adventures in the Forgotten Realm,
Yeah.
D&D themed core-ish set. Previews started today. I haven't really looked at the preview season because I don't really care, to be honest.
how do we how do we do this show after that opening where we now have to talk about this thing that we're just like angry at? It's so weird.
Because the people who make the cards are different than the crappy people who run the corporation.
Jeez, I mean, like, I don't know, man. It feels like I feel like I'm shilling. I feel like I'm shilling a product, and I don't get paid by them to shill a product. I am just part of the ecosystem, and like I said, I like new Magic cards, and I like that there's a D&D set coming, and I hate that I like that, but I do, and I don't.
I just want people to have fun, man. But I also want them to be aware of the shittiness that is happening.
Okay, I guess I can live with that approach where our goal is not to speak the good word of Magic and to spread that. Our goal is to make people's lives better. And we know that Magic cards, Magic ideas, however you are choosing to shuffle them up and play with them, can be a positive thing in people's lives. And that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I'm not trying to police how people engage with the stuff that you want to engage in. You know, it's like there's a lot of, you know, crappy ways or crappy like corporations that you could give your money to. I think, you know, the vast majority of them are crappy. So,
Yeah.
you know, your line is going to be where it is. If all your friends play Magic, you're deeply invested in Magic, and uh you know, like maybe this is the thing that's the most fun for you or whatever. It's like, cool, do that, you know, be happy about that decision, right? And just have as much fun with it as you possibly can. But hopefully at the same time you're like, oh, you know, like they're kind of crappy or whatever. Maybe I shouldn't give them like too much love or whatever. But yeah, you know, engage with whatever makes you happy in the way that it makes you happy, and you shouldn't feel bad about that.
Okay. Let's try and suck some joy out of this D&D set and put it directly into our souls.
All right, so there are dungeons,
Yeah.
and they're cards that exist outside the game. You play a thing that tells you to enter into a dungeon. You pull one of these out from your deck box, doesn't count as a sideboard slot or whatever. You choose which of the 3 dungeons that you want to enter. And then once you have completed the dungeon, that goes away. The game sees that you have completed it.
Hate it. Absolutely hate it. And not just because I'm angry. Really, not just because I'm angry. I promise. It all goes back to my idea about Magic being a language and there being a core to Magic's language and expansions to that core coming at a very, very high cost. For instance, if you make energy a mechanic, you should theoretically have your stupid energy counter with you for every game of Magic played for the rest of time that possibly touches an energy having format. It is there. It will not go away. Dungeons are the exact same thing. Now, they're a little bit better because once you get to the dungeon, they speak the language of Magic. So they get like a half pass from me. And I think playing with them will actually be pretty interesting. From a mechanical standpoint, I'm mostly on board with it. I just hate that, like, theoretically, all games of Magic played for the rest of time could have one of these 3 stupid dungeons sitting on the battlefield. And it'll be important to track them, and we all have to carry these around with us. And
It's not that bad because it's going to be contained, right? Like this is clearly not a mechanic that is going to be evergreen, but this could show up in Modern Horizon 6 or whatever.
yeah, it could.
It's not like there have been a lot of energy cards, Have there been any energy cards since then? Like,
I don't think there's been any, but like, doesn't that also speak to it being a failure in some ways? Like, it should be resonant and something that goes across all of Magic. These new ideas, like Scry, one of the best mechanics I think ever. It feels like an alpha mechanic. That's why it's such a success. And I think like stretching mechanics should mostly do that. They should work in the framework you have. And I get that if you never step outside of it, then things could get stale. And you should take a shot every now and then. But this feels like a shot at very little, with very little upside. The payoff just doesn't feel like it's there for me. And I think the actual playing of the cards will be fine if a little too branching. Like, for instance, we have a new Planeswalker. Do you want to hit us with the text on this Planeswalker before I talk about this more?
Eliwick Tumblestrom, 2GG, 4 starting loyalty, legendary Planeswalker Eliwick. +1, venture into the dungeon. Enter the first room or advance to the next room. -2, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them, put it into your hand. If it's legendary, you gain 3 life. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. -7, you get an emblem with creatures you control, have trample and haste, and get +2/+2 for each differently named dungeon you've completed.
Okay. That +1 is like the weirdo Urza card from the Unstable set, where you go onto the internet and you get an ability. Was it Urza or was it Mishra?
Think it was Urza Planeswalker, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the case. So this,
my unset knowledge is very low.
yeah, same.
Sorry, folks.
We'll let it slide. This feels the same way. Like +1 does a very large amount of things and does it at different states of the game, and it's just like weird. It's weird to me, and I keep saying it. I think it'll play fine. I think it'll be pretty interesting. But I don't love how wordy this has made this card. Like, there's a lot to unpack with it. And it seems very tame for the most part. I think if you look at the 3 dungeons, none of the effects are super pushed at first glance. And again, it's good that they're stepping these things back, because if this was like the hallmark mechanic of, say, Throne of Eldraine, it's just broken and it ruins Magic forever, and we play every game with dungeons from now on. Or if it's Ikoria's hallmark mechanic like Companion, and every game is supposed to be about a dungeon from now on. I'm glad that's not the case. In much the same way lessons were toned back and ultimately safe, feels like these are hitting the same spots, but I'm just not in love with it. It didn't really hit home for me, and I like D&D. I don't play D&D, but I read all the D&D books, and I recognize some of these dungeons, and still doesn't do enough for me.
It's likely going to be a one-off. It's supposed to be novel, and I am not the target audience who could appreciate it. You are halfway there, I think.
Halfway, yep. I think that's a good way of putting it.
So, I don't know. This is not for me. I think that the dungeon stuff will certainly be pretty fun for limited, but like for constructed, it's like these 3 dungeons all do like wildly divergent things, basically. So it's just like, if you're a control deck, you're going to want Dungeon of the Mad Mage almost every single time or whatever. So it's like it's going to be pretty samey in constructed, I think. But for limited, it'll probably be fun, right? And like I could see where it's just like, on turn 4 of a game, you entered into a dungeon, you chose the wrong dungeon, you fool! You should have known the game was going to play out this way or whatever. But other than like that specific thing, I'm just like, yeah, this is not for me. But like, whatever, they're doing it. It's fine. It's probably not going to happen again.
Okay. What else do we have from this set? All the cards we saw are basically dungeon cards. I think we're going to end up back next week with our first preview show for this set. It seems like the timing works out for that.
2-dub, 2/3, creature, dwarf ranger. As long as you've completed a dungeon, this has double strike. Wow. Shortcut Seeker, 3U, 2/5, human rogue. Whenever this deals combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon. Wow. Nadar, Selfless Paladin, 2-dub, 3/3, legendary creature, Dragon Knight. Dragon Knight is badass, let's be real.
Sure.
Vigilance. Whenever this enters the battlefield or attacks, venture into the dungeon. Other creatures you control get +1/+1 as long as you've completed a dungeon. Potentially a very powerful card, right?
Seems fine, yeah.
That's it. That's all.
That's it.
Evolving
Okay.
Wilds too, if you want to.
Yeah, but sinfully ugly Evolving Wilds, and I like this aesthetic. Like I like the original D&D books. If you haven't seen this, it's made to look like a first edition D&D book. I
What?
like Magic variants that look like Magic cards. That's just where I fall on this now. I hate the stupid secret layer metal cards, and the metal aesthetic is 100% on brand for me. I love metal. I love that style of art. I love metal album covers. All that stuff hits for me.
Yeah, but you're like, I like pie and I like gravy, but like you don't mix the
Don't
two
put
or
them
whatever,
together.
you know?
Yep, don't have to do it.
Uh,
So
when
not for me.
when
People will
did
like it though.
when did first edition D&D come out? Was it like the 70s?
Yeah, I think it was mid 70s, but I'm going to do a quick Google and get that exactly.
Yeah, I wanted to say like 75 or something. But yeah, like this Evolving Wilds, it definitely looks like the 70s or somewhere around there, and it's just like
74.
okay,
January 74.
I was close. Off by 12 months.
Yep.
Yeah, why are we trying to make Magic cards look like they're 40 years old or whatever? I don't know.
Well, if they would look like 40-year-old Magic
50-year-old?
cards.
50 years old?
Who knows? Wow, that's scarily close to my birth year.
Yeah.
To be 50 years old.
Yeah.
Don't care for that. Wow.
Old man Brian yells at Evolving Wilds.
Right.
Get off my lawn.
A lot of old man yelling at clouds on this episode. So I'm glad we also gave me a moment to really contemplate my mortality along with all the complaining.
I could go to like a dark place, but I'm not going to. You want to talk about modern instead?
Sure, modern. Yep, let's do that.
Modern challenges. Last weekend, I had to dig for these deck lists because the Magic Online deck list page is broken yet again. So just gonna throw that out there.
We found them though.
We did find them. And I knew how to find them despite the website being broke, which is like not a good thing, right?
Yeah, common circumstance, unfortunately.
Yeah, I should not have had to train myself to figure out how to find the deck list when the website doesn't work. Like, I could definitely count on one hand the amount of websites where I know how to like work and massage their URLs to get to their hidden pages. Anyway, do you want to preface this with anything? Like, or should we just get into it?
I think people are making some deck building mistakes right now, and maybe we can talk more about that as we go through.
How dare you, Brian?
I think they are. Sorry.
Everyone is excellent at deck building, despite what Patrick Sullivan says.
He's right about this one.
Yeah, he is. First challenge on Saturday was won by M. Muck. They were playing Is It Urza? This is a deck that I want to say was mostly popularized by Doomwake over on Twitch, Devin O'Donnell. He got the list from someone named Da Vinci MTG. I'm not familiar with that person or whatever. And this is an Asmore deck that also has like Emery, Ragavan, Urza, some Mox Ambers, Underworld cookbooks, wildly divergent game plans from all of the legendary creatures in the deck. But it's just like, yeah, whatever, throw your mythics together and do some powerful stuff.
Yeah, and it can work. I like a lot of the cards in this deck. In fact, I'm personally working on a deck that looks similar in a lot of ways to this. The exception being...
Put Asmore in your deck, dude.
I don't need to, Jerry, because you have the best Asmore deck. We just spent an entire episode telling people why they should be playing...
But like if you're playing blue red and you're playing Emery, so you want artifacts and you're doing some graveyard stuff, play Asmore. It's worth it.
The reason I want Emery is because I want to control my opposing Asmores and clues and all of this nonsense that's going on and food tokens. So I'm comfortable giving up on Asmore to play a more controlling game built around mostly engineered explosives.
Trying to be like, oh, I want to play a controlling game and I'm going to EE on 0 just to like blow up their stuff and like hopefully not touch mine doesn't make a lot of sense if you're playing Saga. So play Asmore, play Saga, play Emery, play Explosives. All those cards are great. And then if you're behind, then you can EE for 0 and blow up all their foods and Asmores and tokens, right? And if you're ahead, just do something else with it. You know, like who cares? You're winning.
I guess the problem is I don't know how to make those two decks fit in the same place because Asmore requires a lot of cards, right? Like you
Oh, I
have to
did.
have.
Let me send you my deck list.
Oh, okay. Well, you did it for me. I don't even have to worry about it anymore.
Uh, one moment. So as I do, I cut all the win conditions basically.
Obviously, that's just correct magic.
Yeah, that's why I said in the article, man. I was like, this is technically correct, but you gotta watch your time. You
Well,
know.
you know, I'm a very speedy magic player, so this should not be a concern for me.
For folks that don't know Brian, that is a joke.
Yeah. So one of the cool things about this deck, I will say, Mux list, I really like Mox Amber. It is not getting a lot of love.
Mux Amber.
Mux Ambers, Mox Ambers. You just sent me a deck list that I'm now looking at. Yeah, no win conditions, love it. And look at this 4 expressive iteration. I was going to get there eventually, Gerry. Uh, this card seems like a critical part of the reason to even consider not just playing the Golgari food deck, to go ahead and play. Is it? I don't know why nobody else is interested in expressive iteration in a deck where all of your cards cost like 1 and you need the velocity very badly. You solve that problem in Golgari with Trail of Crumbs. You got to solve it in this version too, though.
Yeah. So Thought Monitor is solid, but
Yep.
like if you don't have Cookbook as more, then Thought Monitor is usually pretty expensive. And iteration allows you to get like enough land drops and maybe enough like Mishra's Baubles and stuff like that on the battlefield to make casting it actually palatable.
Okay.
And it also just, it digs you deeper into your deck. It makes it more likely that you can find Emery and Emery will get Cookbook, or maybe you just find your Asmore to get your Cookbook or whatever, right? So expressive iteration ties everything together. I cannot imagine playing the deck without it. It doesn't make any sense.
I agree with you. I dropped this list over in our Discord, so our patrons will be able
I
to go
did
ahead and take
already.
a look at that.
I did already.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it's there twice now. That should be a double stamp of approval. Basically, looking like you cut the Urzas from this list, like you said, no more win conditions. Also,
It's
not
just
messing around with the metallic rebukes or anything like that.
it's just kind of bad. Urza's like fine, but it's just expensive and doesn't really accomplish a whole lot. You know,
Hmm.
I'd much rather be able to like iteration on turn 2 and get some cheap cards, maybe get a 0 to play that turn, or like do it on turn 3 and make sure that I get to like make my land drop and play another spell. So
How have your Mox Ambers been? Because you are running a little thin now, right? We're down to 4 Emery, 4 Asmore. That's it. Are you cool with that?
yeah, mostly. I mean, there are definitely some games where it's not online, but even, I mean, if we're still talking about Urza, Mox Amber with Urza is whatever. It could be a blank piece of cardboard. It's still tapping for
Sure.
blue, right?
Yep.
But
Yep. Yep.
uh, I think what you're really asking is about Regavan.
Probably. That probably has more to do with it. Yeah.
I think Regavan is good turn 1 on the play and basically no other time.
Just gets brick walled too easily.
It does. And I mean, the more interaction you play, whatever, like if your opponent's playing a slow deck, maybe it's okay. It's going to generate some free wins outside of those scenarios, but like the percentage is super, super low.
Mhm.
And if it is working, it's helping you win in a lot of different ways, just like, generating treasures. So you have more artifacts for your thought monitors and you're accelerating into like Urza and all of these different things. But you also just don't necessarily need to be playing this high variance card when you could just play iteration and accomplish a lot of
Okay. Uh,
things. Anyway, we should talk about like the challenge decks and not like, what I'm playing.
yeah, but your deck is better.
It is better. I agree.
Let me read this deck and then we can move on. 4 Spiral Bluff Canal, 4 Emery, 3 Oval Chase Daredevil, Lightning Axe, 4 Thought Manager, 4 Ether Spellbomb, 2 Engineered Explosives, 4 Street Wraith, 4 Mishra's Bauble, 2 Mox Amber, Mountain Flooded Strand, 2 Island, 4 Underworld Cookbook, 4 Expressive Iteration, 4 Asmore, 3 River Glide Pathway, 2 Steam Vents, 4 Urza Saga, 4 Scalding Tarn, a Springleaf Drum, and a Galvanic Blast. This just looks so much better to me. I get the complaint about not winning games. What about a Brainstone, though? Do you not like Brainstone in these decks?
I think 1 Brainstone is fine if you want to
Okay.
do it, because your saga goes off and you either want mana, something that interacts with your opponent, or like
Or gas.
a way to draw a card. Yeah.
Yep.
And Brainstone is pretty solid. It's just like fairly clunky, especially if you don't have a bunch of extra resources lying around. but it's fine. I think it's completely reasonable. A lot of the time, I'll just get like a bauble, so then I have a 0 for thought monitor or a thing that I can cantrip away if I want to. So it's just like, do you want a 0 mana cantrip or like a 2 mana brainstorm, basically? And I think I think brainstorm is fine. Naturally drawing it, especially in an artifact deck, is completely reasonable. It's not like outlandish to play this card that you think is bad or whatever.
Okay.
But most of the time, bauble's better.
Okay. Yeah, so a little bit more aggressive slant from M Muck's list with the Ragavans, actual win conditions like Urza. Gerry looking to play the hard way. I like Jerry's approach. I think it's just getting to the core of what this deck is actually about, which is what good deck building is in most instances.
Second place, Canister, Amulet Titan. Uh, Canister is playing Abundant Harvest. A lot of other folks are not. I think Abundant Harvest is a pretty big win. Also, this deck is just kind of busted. I think it's maybe not like clearly the best deck, but it is probably the best deck.
Does its thing so consistently now. Abundant Harvest, a fine pickup. I also like a Brainstone here. Maybe I'm a lunatic, but there's a lot of spots where like putting specific cards back into your deck is very important. And
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's small, but I do think that a Brainstone could be fine if you're like severely lacking gas. But don't you just get Amulet like 95% of the time?
95% of the time, but I think having that one of in your deck is mostly worth it. I don't know. I have to play more with Amulet Titan. That's not where my focus has been, and I will certainly float a Brainstone in and out to explore that a little bit more. But this deck is doing the same thing it's always done. It's just getting more and more consistent, basically, and doing the thing more regularly. It's got a awesome B plan in Urza Saga. Like you have the beatdown aspect, but more importantly, you always have Amulet of Vigor, which I just can't express how much that changes what this deck is capable of. It's going to do its thing so reliably now.
Amulet is basically like a Soul Ring, except that you can like untap
with greater upside.
Yeah.
Like it just does even more in a lot of occasions.
Yeah, so just like, oh, you thought like one amulet is pretty good. I mean, you've seen the double amulet draws, right? Like they're just obscene. It's just comically easy to kill your opponent. And with 4 sagas, it's just like turn 3, let's go almost every time. And then you also have like a Dryad of the Elysian Grove Valakut backup plan. So
yeah, I have a feeling I should not buy the foils from this particular version of Amulet Titan. I don't know that I'll ever get to play it in person. And the ones I'm missing are quite expensive. It's mostly like the fetch lands and Urza Sagas.
But you're free rolling at this point because the like foil amulets that you bought infinite ago are so expensive now, right?
Yeah, kind of. I actually don't know if they went up all that much after I bought them. Where I did kill it though was Dryad of the Elysian Grove. That was a good purchase in full art foil. So maybe that can be my free roll.
Amulet of Vigor.
What are we looking at? Can I retire?
World Wake foil. Oh, $43.
Yeah, I didn't pay much less than that. I think I paid probably 30 or so.
Yeah, the line is pretty flat.
There was a reprint of Amulet of Vigor. Is that correct?
Yeah, that usually doesn't touch like the
original
OG foil.
I know, and that's why I like to go with the OGs for a lot of reasons. And it's not necessarily like it cratered it; it just stopped moving where you would have expected it to kind of blow up.
There was a secret layer, I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. There's a secret layer for goddamn everything. So
of course there is. Of course.
Regular amulets are 24 though. It's like still pretty good.
May as well buy the foil. That's what I always say.
I mean, I'm not going to do that, but to each their own, I suppose.
Yeah, I really don't have any notes on this list, though. It looks completely solid, like basically everything Canister is doing in the main deck and the sideboard, and I would happily sleep this up.
All right, I don't necessarily want to spend a bunch of time on this, but he's jamming the 61-14.
Yeah. Like, I've heard a lot of discussion around it. I kind of get it. I have no opinion as to whether it's right. So we're perfectly safe not spending a lot of time on it.
I think it's kind of dope. So the rationale is that you get to play an extra utility land in your main deck, and then you side down to 60 when you actually have your configuration. And I'm pretty sure that's nonsense, but
It's brilliant nonsense, if nothing else, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is like I played a 65 card deck at States one year, Mystical Teachings, to like get more tutor targets in my main deck or whatever. And I think if I could go back, I would probably do like 65-10, but like that wasn't in the rules then, you know.
Right, right, right.
Lava Ridge, third place, Ragavan Stoneblade. This deck is fine. It is solid.
I would say the same. We talked a little bit about Caldra Complete. That's the biggest pickup for me here. Like I know Ragavan seems like it should get the headlines, but I think getting access to this card is worth so much for these decks. I'm not even sure you need to be stretching into red for the Ragavans. I think it's possible that you can just do this blue white, even look at a different third color and figure out some other options. I've seen some like Esper Stoneblade stuff floating around with Vindicates, and it'll all have its place for different metagames. Obviously, this is like the leanest one, which is probably the best default version. I guess you want the cheapest spells.
For modern, yeah. I think if you want to default to that, go right ahead. You can only be so wrong.
Right. And then some specific metagames I'm okay with getting away from red for this list. But Cauldron Complete, if you're a Stoneforge Mystic player in any format, you can safely pick that one up in the nicest foil version available. Or, if you don't have any tournaments coming up, make a proxy. Why not?
Boogles. Not playing Boogles. Playing Delver of Secrets, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Murktide Regent, a couple copies of Subtlety. This is counterspell, but not going as big as like Archmage's Charm. Sometimes you see the Regent decks go up to that as well. And a lot of the time you see them actually just playing like Ragavan instead of Delver.
Yeah, I've seen that. A lot of this deck going around. I am pretty thrilled to see a strategy like this finally take root in Modern. I mean, this is the type of stuff I love playing. I've always loved playing Delver decks. This feels like a real Delver deck. The addition of Subtlety has a lot to do with that. Counterspell, certainly doing the same tricks. So I'm into this. I'm happy it's here. I think it's probably like tier 1.5. I don't think it's among the best decks in the format, but it's getting close. It's getting real close. And I don't know that it really even needs to change anything. I think it just needs to figure out sideboarding plans, get a little bit wider spread of matchups that it's good against. And it has the tools to do that stuff. Like you see sideboard Blood Moon. I think that's a really important card in the format right now. I also really like the 3 Ether Gusts in the sideboard. I think another critical card in the format is Ether Gust. So pleased to see that. This looks like a pretty well-constructed version of the deck. And happy to see it starting to get some run.
I believe I saw this player say that they were playing like a budget version, hence the lack of Force of Negations.
Okay, yeah.
So that's something to consider. Like a lot of the time when you see Delver instead of Ragavan, it's because of Force. But this deck doesn't even have Force. So
yeah.
I guess if there's no Force of Negations, then no Ragavan makes sense also, right? Like this deck as a whole is probably pretty cheap. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, only really like is Murktide Regent? That's a rare, right?
It's a mythic. It was pretty expensive initially. It's like 12 to 14, somewhere in there now.
Okay.
Baubles are like, I don't know, 40 or something on Magic Online.
Yeah, we picked up those shinies a while ago. That's a big win.
Nice, dude. I kind of want to look those up now. You did Cold Snap, yes?
I think so.
How much do you think they are?
This might have been before I was always getting the oldest version, though. I might have like Iconic Masters ones.
Oh, no, Brian.
Would that be a disaster?
Brian, no. The Cold Snap foil Mishra's Baubles are $140.
Whoa. That was not a number I was expecting.
Iconic Masters, $34. Double Masters, $23.
All right. I am concerned. I may have the wrong baubles here.
This is why you buy OG, folks.
Yes, it is. We'll have to look into that one.
Mana Symbol, 5th place, 4-color, Indomitable Creativity, Velomachus, kind of like taking turn stuff with Savor the Moment, Time Warp, also playing Ren and 6 and Teferi. 2 copies of this deck made top 8, I believe. Yeah, there's another one in 8th. And I've played against this deck. I've seen it play out. I feel like this is just a clunker that is good against like the mid-rangey kind of piles. And to some extent that includes like a lot of the Asmore decks, but against anything with like, I don't know, Ragavan and Counterspell and stuff, it just seems pretty pretty medium.
Yeah, a lot of high casting costs on your key spells. You have Teferi, which I think is a big pickup.
Also, high casting cost.
Yeah, 3 mana for sure, for sure. I like this deck in theory. I'm a big Velamalchus Lorehold fan. I predicted it would do some very powerful things, and it is doing so. I also like the idea of Indomitable Creativity becoming an important modern card, and I think it's doing that very smoothly with the addition of Prismari Command, using Dwarven Mind very effectively. So I like that stuff. I agree with you. It doesn't feel like the right moment for this right now, unless the format is completely dominated by the Asmore decks, because I think that's exactly what they struggle against, is things that just go a little bit bigger. They can do a lot to keep Velamakis under control if they're able to get their game plan going. So it's not like they're completely cold, but a little bit harder to just play fair against this deck. I think it'll usually overwhelm you, control your Asmores, and then go ahead and get Velamakis onto the battlefield.
Yeah, you would just want to do stuff like, play Metallic Rebuke main deck, maybe play Lightning Axe instead of Galvanic Blast, stuff like that. There are like some small concessions that you can make for sure. And I guess explosives on 0 is pretty solid against them if you have time
Yeah,
to keep the mana open and everything. So
sure. Yeah, another good spot for explosives. The more I look at this format, the more I'm just like, explosives everywhere. It's so good in so many matchups. It has some holes, like Murktide Region is certainly annoying. The fact that they're able to do the old Tombstalker trick and get their converted mana cost high. But for the most part, you've got good targets against every single deck.
6th place, friend of the podcast, Kane Reinhardt, Demir Asmore, 2 copies of Urza, a Bone Shards, a Thought Cast, 2 Metallic Rebukes, and other than that, pretty much what you would expect to see for Asmore, for Emery, for Thought Monitor. And this is solid. I watched Kane stream this a little bit.
How did you sort of contrast this with the Is It versions that are going around? What does this do better? What does it do worse?
Well, Brian,
is there a reason to play this?
Well, Brian, I did that this week in my article on StarCityGames.com.
Wow, ahead of the curve.
Basically, you look at the splash cards, right? It's like Bone Shards, sideboard options like Thoughtseize, Fatal Push. You get Tezzeret if you want that as like a non-graveyard reliant trump or whatever.
Yep.
Ashiok is easier to cast. You can cast Oval Chase Daredevil a little bit easier, whereas in the blue-red one, you need Mox plus Asmore. And that seems small, but it comes up a lot. Way more than I thought it would. And I don't know, like Nile Spellbomb instead of Soul Guide Lantern, whatever.
Yeah.
Versus like Galvanic Blast or Lightning Axe, Ragavan. Once you decide like you don't need Ragavan, it's a lot easier to compare because it's like, disruptive element versus disruptive element, removal spell versus removal spell, whatever. But once you're like, oh, I'm going to try expressive iteration in my deck, and then you're like, holy crap, this card is busted, then it's just not a contest in my mind. Like red versus black is already very close, but once you get iteration in the mix, red is better by far.
Okay. So I will not be playing your deck, Kane. I'm sorry. But congratulations on the top 8.
Kane, your gas. The end.
Agreed.
Rakdos N. Gruul. Liquid metal coating Gorilla Shaman.
Sort of love it. I have liked liquid metal coating
too
decks
much
for
too much.
some time. Yes, probably too much. And here we've picked up Obsidian Charmois. That's a card you were pretty high on. Gorilla Shaman, a pretty key piece. I like Fury a lot. Theoretically, I don't know that the metagame has actually fallen in the spot I thought it would, where I was very excited about Fury.
Yeah, Fury's busted, but obviously only against specific things. I was definitely going to point out the called shot on Charmois, but it's also one of those things where it's like I think people are probably overplaying it.
Okay. I also really like Blood Moon in the format right now. So here's another Blood Moon option. I pointed some other Blood Moon options out in my article this past week.
Blood Moon is excellent right now.
Yeah, so
just incredible.
If you can find a reason where like, well, okay, here's something to consider. There's a lot of artifacts. I don't know that Karn interacts with them exactly how you want it to, but it sort of does. Like it's doing a little bit to blunt some of the problem cards we see from other decks. So maybe that's a reason to consider something more liquid metal coating focused.
Yeah, I could see that. I like these Gruul decks in general, not necessarily because of like their game plan, but just because they're trying to turn 2 Blood Moon people, and I think that that's very good right now.
Hmm.
How many copies of Utopia Sprawl do you think you own in real life?
Four, if that. There's no way I have more than four.
It's like a $15 card, Brian.
Really?
Yeah.
Even with a second printing?
Yeah.
That's impressive. Yeah, maybe I don't even have my four. That is also a possibility I'm willing to consider. I know I got the the other one recently. What's the other one green enchantment aura that is important?
Abundant growth?
Is that's the one that cantrips, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought those foils recently, and I was very proud of being ahead of the curve on that. But that's
Okay.
kind of fallen out of favor, unfortunately. I should have gone into Utopia Spirals instead.
Yeah. 8th place, RGNK Phoenix 20. Also playing Velomachus, taking turns thing, mostly same list as 5th place.
Yeah, same notes. Nothing new to add here.
Do you want to like go through the top 32 as much versus like just doing the top 8 in the other challenge?
Let's go to the other challenge. I think there's certainly interesting things going on in the top 32, but the headline story is probably more important because it's going to tell you about what the next tournament is going to be about much more clearly.
Winner from Sunday's challenge, Dimax. Is it prowess with Dragon's Rage Channeler instead of Sprite Dragon, Unholy Heat in the main deck? I think that they said something about like wanting to cut the Unholy Heats or like move them to the sideboard or whatever. I don't remember what for though. But
Uh,
whatever.
this is a very different looking list from some of the other stuff we've seen uh, do well lately, like the Delver of Secrets slower focus list. This is the pure beatdown game, Stormly Entity back in the mix. So more like the pre MH2 version with
Right.
just the addition of these new cards, Dragon Rage Channeler, a little bit of Unholy Heat. And that deck was solid previously. I talked about this deck a little bit and how I think its games 2 and 3 are very strong against the format. And then you just kind of have these dummy game ones where your deck is consistent, powerful, and just goes off sometimes. So I still think this is in a good place too, and a fine choice if you have a modern tournament coming up.
Yeah, deck is solid. I think just a lot of people forgot about it, kind of. It
Yep,
didn't really utilize a lot of the new cards. Obviously, the red one drops are pretty strong, but other than that, you're not really picking up anything. So there is definitely a temptation to just try out the new things and kind of let the old stuff fall by the wayside.
absolutely, and I think that's been manifesting throughout the last week or so of events, and it's one of the reasons when I wrote my article this week, I felt like I might actually be in an advantage position because I didn't have the chance to play, and I just had to skip all that fun stuff. And it's like, okay, we have a serious format now. It's time to get down to business. What actually works here?
Right. Second place, Golgari Yawgmoth. A couple copies of Grist in the main deck, 2 copies of Crime Punishment in the sideboard. I like that card a lot. A lot of the same things that we're talking about. Why EE is good, usually on
Yep.
0 a lot of the time against the Asmore decks. Punishment also has the upside of killing the Urza, like the land itself.
Awesome. Awesome pickup. Really good technology going back into the depths of older sets and finding a really cool card that I think is perfectly well suited for the format right now. And you had a lot of good things to say about this deck as a counter to Asmore. And, it does that, but it's also a pretty fine deck in and of itself. I think it does its thing very consistently. Picked up a very good mana boost in the form of Ignoble Hierarch, which really helps the secondary beatdown plan. And Grist was another card that you had a lot of good things to say about too. So again, this looks very similar to the older list, despite some actual meaningful pickups and the fact that it's just a well-positioned deck right now. Probably a little underplayed for how good it is.
Probably. Third place, Talisker. Is it Delver, Murktide region again, this time with Ragavan and some Force of Negations in the sideboard? And yeah, usually like the Delver decks are the ones that play Counterspell, no Archmage's Charm, and then the Stoneforge Mystic ones are the ones that go up to Archmage's Charm. But sometimes you see like a little bit of a mix and match.
Do you like this version of Delver of Secrets better, or the one from the other challenge without the rag events? The budget version, if you will, which I think is just like actually a very reasonable secondary option.
I think if you're going to play Ragavan, it should be in a deck like this where you're like, I kind of want to mulligan to a 1 drop,
Hmm.
Maybe you keep an interactive hand that has a Murktide region or something, but you're definitely looking to put your opponent on a clock. And at that point, if you're trying to clear the way for stuff, I mean, Ragavan fits perfectly into the archetype. So I like Ragavan here. Delver of Secrets is more of like the, you know, do we, don't we kind of category. And maybe if you're trying to just like play 11 one drops, then you are sort of priced into playing Delver. But this deck has 24 ways to transform it. The other one had 25, and that's a little on the low side for me.
It is a little bit on the low side. I'm sure you feel that playing the games, and there's no real way around that in the modern format until they eventually add Brainstorm in Modern Horizons 3.
I mean, you could do things like play Seagate Restoration if you wanted to. I think that's one of those things where when you're doing stuff like that, you should probably know that it's just wrong to try and jump through all the hoops to make this card a little bit better.
Yeah.
If anything, I would be like, maybe you shave like a Murktide Regent or something to try and get an extra spell in the deck. I think you could do that, but it's like this deck has 17 lands, which is pretty low. It has 4 Mishra's Baubles, which you need to fuel the channelers and
Yep.
even the regions to some degree. So like they're doing the best they can to get as many spells into their deck to transform Delver. It's just tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see a spot for the squeeze either. And I just really like Blood Moon out of this deck. This particular list has an Alpine Moon in the sideboard. I've never really loved that card. And so I think once you go to the Seagate Restoration route, now you've made your Blood Moons worse. So I'm not really interested in that. I think you just kind of live with it, and your Delver is going to be your worst one drop. So be it.
Yep. Fourth place, McWright. Amulet, but playing the more classic 60-15, although they're also playing a list that is pretty similar to Canisters.
Yeah, it looks almost spot for spot the same. And I think it's like the Ghost Quarter is in Canister's main deck and it's in the sideboard here. And I'm sure there's a couple other small differences. But
second Grazer over second Azusa.
Yeah, that's a good point. But consistent, powerful, love Amulet right now. Nothing else to say.
Hamuda, fifth place. Mono, white, Colossus Hammer. I think this deck is good.
Yeah, we've talked a bit about this leading up to this show and how Urza Saga was a pretty big game changer for this. And as I look through this list, it does everything I said it would. It very consistently executes this game plan. It's just a question of how good this game plan is against the format, which is something I find myself asking a lot with these linear decks right now, is that they've all picked up really good consistency mechanisms. I wrote about Ad Nauseum this week, for instance, which is just like always, always, always doing its thing on turn 4 now. And that matters to a very large extent because it's no longer about, is my deck functional? It's about, is my deck functional in the context of the metagame? And I think this deck has to ask the exact same thing. Does this thing matter against the broader metagame? So who do you want to play Hammer against? Does it line up well with the other top contenders in the format?
The game plan is good. Trying to get people dead on turn 3 in the midst of them playing like a little bit of a slower beatdown plan or like these kind of like longer grindier decks or against Amulet, which can also kill you on turn 3. I think that plan itself is good, but when your game plan relies on artifacts and artifacts are under just a ton of hate right now, I think that maybe you should try and look for something else. And if something better doesn't exist, that's okay. Like this plan is still fine. You're still going to get them some amount of the time.
Yep.
Maybe at that point you try and look for like a backup plan or something. But when you're playing like Memnites and Ornithopters, like there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, I think we found our backup plan in Urza Saga, and unfortunately, it's like soft for the exact same things. So
yeah, an actual potato in sixth place, playing I think 75 that won the last challenge. The Is It Asmore Ragavan Urza nonsense.
Yep, we've said our piece on it. Jerry's list is better.
Matus F34 Eldrazi Good God. 2 copies of Urza Saga. I was wondering about that.
Yeah. Here's Eldrazi. I mean, again, if Karn's good, that's a point for Eldrazi, but this is still the same deck. I don't want to play this right now. Sorry. Maybe it's fine. I doubt it.
It's cool that the deck already wants to play Expedition Map.
I guess that's true. And then we just add in this one Relic of Progenitus, and now we have a quote-unquote tutor package.
Wonder why Relic instead of Soul Guide Lantern? Like, is Tarmogoyf that big of a deal?
There's like other corner cases where like the consistent relicking can be worth something.
Yeah, sure. Whatever. I'm not going to get into the minutia of Eldrazi Tron.
Deal.
Eighth place, we have Canister again. This time with Jeskai Stoneforge Regivan thing. A few more Planeswalkers than folks normally play, but mostly the same stuff.
Yeah, nothing new for me to add. Prismatic Ending is a very good Magic card. If that isn't already clear to you, I think it's really important for the Scapeshift decks too, the Bring to Light Scapeshift decks, which is another deck I'm kind of high on right now.
It's good.
That also didn't pick up anything, so I think people are playing a little bit less of it than they should be. But it all depends what direction this metagame is going to go in. Is it more about focusing on the Asmore stuff, or is it going to focus more on the Delver side of things, or is Amulet going to rise up? And depending on which of those three pillars really start to pull ahead, because I think that's where the top of the format is right now. It's some form of Izzet, be it Prowess Delver, or a more traditional list. Or is it the Asmore decks, or is it Amulet? And once we answer that question, then we can start to pick at it with some of these weirder things going on along the fringes.
Yeah, and then you can also start looking at sort of the more fringe decks like the Colossus Hammer decks, and try and find the thing that's best positioned to fight.
Yep. And that all adds up to a pretty healthy modern format. I mean, Urza Saga, it's definitely too good. And nobody's disputing that fact. But is the format actually worse because Urza Saga is a part of it? I don't really think so yet. Very big yet. Because I think we could reach a point where you just get sick of it.
I do. I think it's worse. But
Okay. I respect that stance. I mean, like, do you think it's worse at this moment, or do you think it is going to get worse, though? That's what I would really hold you to the fire with.
Oh, it's definitely going to get worse.
Yeah.
If you saw like a pro tour in this format or something, it would be bad.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see how the next months, weeks, years play out. We'll start crawling through dungeons, and maybe that'll alleviate all the stress that Urza Saga is putting on us. It doesn't matter. I'm playing with proxies anyway. Go ahead and ban it. I don't care.
I'll play on Moto and cash out my tickets.
Appreciate you, card hoarder.
As I've been doing for the last 20 years. I wonder actually how much money I've made from Magic Online. Granted, it's like not going to be a good hourly, right? But
yeah. So I've cashed out my collection for some pretty big paydays a couple of times on Magic Online. I wish I was more detailed about the money being put into it, and that all like disappeared somewhere along the line. I have to assume I'm up just based on like the really big sales. And if I actually put that much money into Magic Online, I would be kind of horrified. And I also remember periods of time where like I would go a year or two without actually putting dollars onto the platform. So,
I went like 15 years without putting money on it.
It's a good run.
Yeah. But that was like, I'm, keeping my collection this entire time and upkeeping it. And then I started like selling out and then like buying in to like play a modern tournament or something, And then just at that point, it was like, I could look for someone to buy tickets from, but whatever, who cares? I'll just spend a hundo so I can buy this last stuff.
Right. The laziness basically took over at some point.
Yep.
I understand that.
So I did directly give them money at a few different points, but it was definitely for just very small amounts. And now I have like, I don't know, like 1,500 tickets worth of stuff on my account or something. And like, that's just what I've been juggling the last few years.
Beautiful. Keep juggling. Don't put those dollars in. Nobody else put any dollars in. And then somehow we'll get through this.
The depressing thing is like, I don't even think it matters.
We have to have some positivity on the show. We can't just say nothing we do matters. Give me some ray of hope, something to cling to, Gerry.
Nah, because that's kind of where I'm at. Like our podcast audience, it is relatively vast, and I love the folks, and they're all great, and I want to tell them all that they matter. But if all of you bought like 10 secret layers with the last one, and now you buy 0, it's a drop in the bucket. It doesn't matter.
What a powerless feeling.
Game.
Good luck.